To order, roll call.
Hannah here.
Grillo here.
Kipchinsky here.
David Chair.
Guzikowski here.
Okay.
Chandler
Minutes
here.
of January 23rd, 2024. Everybody please take a look. And when you're satisfied, there's no discussion, omissions, errors, or corrections. Motion.
Seifert moves to approve the minutes of January
Commissioner Siepert, you are not on the microphone.
Hit your button, Fred. Is it working?
Seifert moves
If not, grab Greg's microphone. There you go.
Oh, okay. We've got more buttons. All right, Seifert moves to approve the minutes of January 23rd, 2024.
Guzikowski will second.
Roll call, beginning with Christine.
Hannah, I.
Grillo, aye.
Kipchinsky, I.
Gavich, aye.
Guzikowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler abstains.
Okay. Item number 4, Common Council actions recently done. There are currently none to report. The review and discuss the report on the Board of Housing and Zoning Appeals. We've had no actions to date. And review and discuss the quarterly Parks and Recreation Commission action. We'll see that April 23rd, 2024. So moving right along to old business, we'll go to 7A, and it's consideration of a conditional use permit for North Investments LLC for an automotive, mechanical truck and trailer repair and truck parking on the property 9810, 9840, and 9880 South Ridgeview Drive. Carrie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Plan Commissioners will recall that this was reviewed originally at the October 24th meeting, and it was held several times, once to provide some additional time for the applicants and their consultants to gather a few more pieces of information. And then, of course, it was subsequently delayed due to scheduling issues. So we are here tonight to review for the final time the information regarding this conditional use permit request. It is for automotive repair. Let's try that again. Automotive mechanical repair. Got it. This is specifically related to truck and trailer repair, and it's for the tenants on the property. This is not for public use. It's not going to be a business, a commercial enterprise for anybody with a truck or a trailer to come and get their vehicles repaired. There's also a large portion of the property that is requested for truck parking. It is current on the property in the center. And Plan Commissioners will also recall that these 3 properties were subject to a certified survey map to combine the properties into a single property. So we will have a building at the northern end, a building at the southern end, and truck parking in between. We also have a consideration for outdoor storage. That's not just for the trucks and the trailers, but it's also for the proposed use that's there for the towing and recovery service. We'll get more into those details. In fact, the area for the towing and recovery service is in the red box on the screen. And for orientation purposes, north is on the left side of the screen. So the towing and recovery services portion is on that portion of the property at 9810. They do have an office component. They were originally located in 9880, or the southern building. They will be having all of their operations confined to the northern portion of the property. There is currently a fenced area where they store the towed vehicles. My understanding from the information that was provided is that they store these vehicles for up to 45 days, probably less, but that's before they are taken to auction. These are not for junk or salvaged or wrecked vehicles. These are kind of a repossession situation. The fence is a chain link fence that has a fabric covering on it. That unfortunately was not permitted. There's no permit on file for it, so that would be something that would have to be corrected if this were to receive Plan Commission approval. One of the other portions of this outdoor storage area is that there was a shipping container that was in there, and it was several feet above the height of the fence because the fence is a 6-foot tall fence. Per code, that shipping container would have to be removed. And in the updated narrative, we did receive information stating that the shipping container would be removed from that area. Moving along and just kind of giving a little bit more of an overview of the total request here. Some of the uses that had been originally part of the request have been eliminated, and that was due to some of the conflicts with the code in terms of uses that were permitted, uses that would require additional conditional use consideration. So there will be 2 users or 2 tenants in the 9810, the northern building, 1 user in the 9880 building. The 9810 or northern building, that will have TNT, which is the owner of the property, and the Nationwide Towing and Recovery Service. In 9880 or the southern building, the tenant is proposed to be Keller Trucking. So originally there was a conditional use permit that had been granted in 2018 for 9880, and that was for what the old category in the old code was for transshipment depot facility and truck engine repair, and that was for a single user. Since this is now one property with multiple users, that conditional use permit is kind of null and void, and we have to go through a conditional use permit process for the entirety of the property and all of the uses. The minimum requirements that we had talked about previously for parking have been addressed in these revisions. So in the center of the property, we have the truck and trailer parking area. And the other stalls, there's also truck and trailer parking in the loading dock area on the northern building. The rest of the parking is really for passenger vehicles, so for employee parking. Total, there will be 39 stalls on the southern end and 19 stalls on the northern end. Now, code requirements. The current code requires that all uses have to provide cumulative parking. So if you have 2 uses, it has to be parking that's sufficient for both. In this case, we have office space, and we also have not necessarily warehouse or distribution, but we do have an opportunity to say whether or not, if there were to be warehouse uses on the property in the future, if this would meet the requirement. So office requires 1 stall for every 300 square feet. That would require 11 for the northern building and 17 for the southern building. We don't need anything for truck repair because that's not a commercial use. In other words, this is just private truck repair for the tenants of the property, their own vehicles. Warehouse and distribution, that's 1 stall for every 1,500 square feet. So if we look at the totality of the property, we have an excess of parking. So the parking concerns that had been raised previously, we're no longer having any concerns with that. As long as the parking is sufficient for the number of employees, and as long as the truck drivers for all of the uses with their personal vehicles are parked in marked and striped stalls, and that they can use any parking stall, any passenger vehicle parking stall on the property, be it north or south. There is sufficient for both. Keller Trucking, which will be in the southern building, they are anticipating to have 4 employees, and combined the towing and TNT Express uses on the northern end will have an anticipated 10 employees. So we have, again, an abundance of parking for both uses. And there are 32 truck and trailer stalls in the center. Now, one of the concerns that had been raised previously that staff still have a concern about is the commingling of the vehicles. We had previously seen where passenger vehicles were parked in the truck and trailer stalls. The information that we received in the updated narrative stated that that would no longer be the case. So that's going to be something that will be an enforcement issue should that still occur after this conditional use permit. The towing operation, even though it is behind a fence, will still need to have landscape screening per code. And we already mentioned that the shipping container will be removed. Now, one of the other areas that had been mentioned in the narrative is that the trash and recycling containers would be behind the fence. And staff have mentioned that there is a concern for that, one for access, because it would be behind a locked fence. And even if that even if that access or a key or somehow would be provided to the trash and recycling pickup company, how are people going to be getting to this during business hours? Are we going to have trash that's piling up outside of the fence because we can't access the actual containers, the refuse containers? So staff have a concern for them being located behind the fence and also being part of an area that's supposed to be for parking of towed vehicles. It just doesn't make much sense. There is also a requirement that any trash and recycling containers be in an approved enclosure per code, and an approvable enclosure per code is not a chain link fence. It is actually a masonry enclosure. So those are the concerns that can be just addressed by following code requirements and requiring that as part of the conditions and restrictions. The other portion of the conditions and restrictions, should this move forward, if the if the towing and recovery service is allowed as part of the conditional use with their outdoor storage area, there would be restrictions on what kind of things could be stored there. So no junk or inoperable vehicles. This would have a limitation up to 45 days, and then they'd have to be removed, and et cetera. No junk or equipment or anything else stored behind that fence. The other location of a proposed trash enclosure is on the south end, and that's in the blue box that's on the right side of the screen. We had previously seen where this area needed some attention. There is a non-compliant trash enclosure that is there that was in disrepair. We did see tires and refuse and things that had been out there. We have been told as part of the narrative that that is all going to be cleaned up and brought into compliance. So that would also be a requirement in the conditions and restrictions. On the screen right now is the interior layout of the northern building, although this may change slightly just based on the use for the two tenants. The truck service, again, is for the repair of TNT Express's vehicles. And then on the southern end, while this does show multiple offices and areas for the 9880 building, there will be one tenant, and that's Keller Trucking. The service area is for the repair of their own vehicles. As a reminder, the Commission's initial review and recommendation of the proposed conditional use permit is not an endorsement of any site architectural, landscaping, or lighting plan that may be required as part of the final conditional use permit. A more detailed review of any plans required by the conditional use permit, and indeed this would require site and building plan review should it be approved, will be conducted by staff and the Plan Commission subsequent to the issuance of a conditional use permit and accompanying the conditions and restrictions. There are findings that are in your reports, and those are for your consideration and also to make findings and recommendations as part of your review. There is also a suggested motion on the screen. I will update this in just a moment. We do have a suggested motion that does not stay, includes the outdoor storage, but we do not have the same concerns that we had previously. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Before we go to the commission, applicant want to say anything or just wait on questions? Okay. Who's ready to start? How about we start to my right? Chauncey, what you got?
I do have a couple questions for the applicant. Please give
Name and
your
address.
Gary Billington, 175 West Summerhill Place.
Okay, one question about the shipping container. So to my understanding, that is going away, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, yet, based on the information in our packets, it was used to store personal items, so will that be replaced with something else?
Potentially it could, but could move to being inside the office. So they would have to go inside the office to get their personal belongings instead of in the storage. Probably work out better.
And then any feedback on the fence, some changes or identifying that the fence is there and
Mean-
compliant?
I'm not I'm familiar with the city's ordinance, but I mean, it's screened, but to Carrie's point, it may have to be brought up to standard, to a new standard, because the buildings were originally built, 90s, I think. It's been a long time, so it's possible that that screening would have to be like maybe increased or something, like thicker, but you clearly can't see anything from the parking lot or the freeway. But if it needs to be upgraded, that's one of the things we've said we'll do.
Just a quick question, Carrie. I may have interpreted that differently, needing an upgrade. Is it just documenting that it's there, or it needs to be changed, or?
I mean, it's really, the next phase is the inspection and the rest of the review, right? Correct, by the
So,
entities?
so the next, should this be recommended for council approval, the next step is conditions and restrictions. That'll state what the terms of the conditional use permit are, and then it'll go to council for final approval. If it gets final approval from council, then it'll have to come back to the plan commission for site and building plan review, and that's where the screening comes in. So one, they will need to get a permit for the fence, because that didn't have a permit to begin with. And then the second part of that would be screening. Now, they have fabric on the fence, which we've kind of shied away from in the past just due to maintenance issues. They tend to rip, tear, float about in the breeze, and then they never get replaced. So it's not necessarily that the chain link is the issue, it's more the screening. And screening in this case would be from I-94, and that would be incorporated into the landscaping plans. That would be the screening per code.
Thanks, Gary. And then one additional question. So once again, to my understanding, there was a specific area on site to hold vehicles for auction.
Correct.
So will that remain there as well? Or
That's-
will this be relocated?
That's the area we're talking, the screened area we're
The
talking
screen,
about, on
okay.
the upper left-hand side of the drawing.
So the vehicles will remain there?
For somewhere between 30 and 45 days, however long it takes to clear the title with whoever the repossessor is, and then they go to auction.
Now,
So they're not there that long. And there's no junk vehicles there. These are vehicles that are repossessed, and then if they don't make some kind of an arrangement, they go to auction.
Another question for you, Carrie. So is there a time frame that we have per code to keep cars that are, or vehicles that aren't?
Nothing, no, there's nothing
Oh, okay.
specific in the code that would be at the plan commission's discretion, and 45 days does seem to be a reasonable amount of time, as long as it's confined to that specific area as approved by the plan commission.
Okay, thank you.
No.
Thank you.
Brad?
Yeah, I have a question about auto repair, truck repair. Do they do any of that outside, or is it all inside the building?
It's all inside,
It's all inside?
in both the buildings, yeah.
Okay, so no repair outside, it's all inside. Thank you.
Chris, you're up.
The screening, Carrie said that we need to discuss that a little more for, is that with the cyclone fence? Is it the material that they're using with it? Or is it have to be replaced altogether?
No, I think the chain link fence is fine, but the screening has to be with landscaping.
Okay,
So, and there's a landscape plan that actually goes along the truck parking area for I-94. We haven't gotten to that yet because we haven't gotten to that stage in the review process. But that would just have to, we would have to maintain that landscaping screening for the fenced area as well.
okay, thank you. No further questions.
Ashley?
No questions, thank you.
Lauren?
Nothing for me.
Nothing here.
Okay. But he pretty much hit the fence screening. Carrie she went on about the material. It's probably been there for 20-some years. It's probably not going to stand up to what we want to see there. I'm okay if we feel the vegetation will screen it. If not, our alternatives are aluminum slats or
Well, let me just clarify that the fence is new.
oh, the fence is
The
new?
fence is new. The buildings have been in existence for a while.
Okay,
But the fence didn't get a permit. So the chain link fence is there and it has fabric material on the outside. But again, we don't typically allow for the material on the outside just for maintenance purposes. So the requirement is going to be for landscape screening because that's more permanent.
The previous owner put the fence up and didn't get a permit. Fix it.
but you did put the material on.
Hmm?
You guys installed the material?
No,
Oh, the previous owner.
previous owner added the fence and added the material.
And, you know, we have one standout business where we allow material on the fence. It's in a high-profile area on 27th Street. It's terrible.
And we did submit, yeah, we did, the landscape plan did cover that area.
We'll
The
just,
vegetation part,
yeah, when we get to
for the
that,
height.
for that stage of the review, we'll just make sure that the landscape plan includes
Okay.
that.
Okay.
Trash enclosures. So it's just the one on the south has been cleaned up and it's adequate to our code currently? Or
No.
acceptable on a grandfather basis? How's it
No,
done?
that trash enclosure was never up to code. It's, I don't even know when that was installed, but that was something that we didn't review and approve. It is probably, when I looked at it, I estimated that it was probably too tall. It was made out of wood, and it was not to our standard. It wouldn't have been to the old code either. So a trash enclosure on that area would have to be compliant with current code, and what's out there right now is not.
And that's the plan to bring that up.
Yeah, we understand that that has to be.
Same, and the same on the north.
Correct. Unless the plan commission feels otherwise, staff just has a major concern with locating the trash receptacles behind a locked and fenced gate, particularly when there's other vehicles that are going to be parked there. How do people access that? Are we going to end up with trash that ends up outside of the fence because people can't get to it? Do we have a situation where now we are commingling trash and vehicles that are going to be for sale at auction? There's how do people access it just normally? I think there are too many questions there, and there should be a location where everybody can just access the trash and it's in an enclosure.
So when we get to the next phase, what we want to do is work with the inspection, you know, do the review and figure out if there's a common place where we could put one that meets the code for both buildings. But we'll see how that works. We'll just have to address that, but we understand that has to be done.
So we'll get that in conditions.
Yeah.
Okay. Don't want to hold it up from there. Other than that, no. Detention basin, we're all good? Got that all worked out?
Yeah, so we'll review that further when it comes to site and building plan review, but they have submitted preliminary stormwater management plans. We've taken a real initial look and have provided some feedback back to the designer on
And did they get
additional.
back to you with the water calcs?
They have not yet, no, I'm still waiting for that information.
I asked them to, but we can work on that.
Yeah, we've got some time for
They've been pretty busy too.
that. No, all good, thank you.
Yeah. Different property, challenging and.
I mean, that's
Inherent
part of the
problem.
review. The next stage, we'll make sure that.
Yep, that sounds good.
Okay. Is there any other discussion or questions? Not seeing none. Motion. Carrie, you got the
So, yeah, well, there wasn't really an amendment, there was just a carryover from the previous review. The only thing that would have to be incorporated is the highlighted part. If the plan commission is okay with that outdoor storage area for the towing and recovery, you need to include the highlighted area in your motion.
Okay.
Okay. Seipert moves that the planning commission recommends that the common council approves a conditional use permit for auto body and automotive mechanical trucks and trailer repair and truck parking facilities and outdoor storage on the properties at 9810, 9840, 9880 South Ridgeview Drive after a public hearing and subject to conditions and restrictions that will be prepared for the Plan Commission's review at the next meeting, February 27th, 2024.
Guzekowski, second.
Roll call, beginning with Dawn.
Grillo, aye.
Shinsky, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Hannah, aye.
Okay. Good luck. Item 8A is new business. It is review of a certified survey map for United Parcel combining the properties at 6800 South 6th Street and 6855 South Howell Avenue. Melody.
Okay, the applicant is looking to combine both the properties at the facility site. It will be just under 73 acres after combination. This is the first page of the proposed CSM. North is to the top of the screen. On this page, it'll show any easements, any delineated wetlands. It will be noted that any floodplains will need to be added to the map prior to recording. And with that, there's a suggested motion.
Excellent. The applicant want to come up first or wait on questions? Anybody? United Parcel? You'll wait? Okay. Are there any residents that want to ask any questions that are here concerning item 8A? Okay. We'll go to the commission. This time we'll go to my left. Christine?
Yeah, actually, I did not get a chance to kind of read through this, but maybe a question to the applicant. What is the reason for combining both of those properties?
Need your name and address, sir.
Paul Emig, 1300 West Canal Street, Milwaukee. So UPS has another item that's coming up right after this for doing a parking lot expansion and to meet city requirements. My understanding, Carrie, there's buildings on the northern / western parcel, and right now there's employee parking that spans the two parcels. And to meet city code, technically the single parking lot needs to be on a single property. So we're proposing to combine the properties into one so that the current parking and the future parking is all up to code.
Thank you.
Okay, Christine? All right,
Thanks.
Dawn?
No questions?
Ashley?
No questions.
Chris?
No questions.
Brad?
Is there any exit that you're going to have on Howell Avenue, or is it all going to be on 6th Street?
You'll see when we get to the next question. As of right now, for the current project, there will be no cross connection to Howell. Everything will stay off of 6th Street.
Thank you.
Kelsey?
No questions, thank you.
Okay. I myself do not have any questions either. Simple CSM. So there's no further discussion. Motion on 8A.
Guzekowski makes a motion that the Plan Commission recommends to the Common Council that a certified survey map submitted by Matthew Zastro, United Parcel Service, UPS, be approved for the properties at 6800 South 6th Street and 6855 South Howell Avenue with the following conditions. One, that the floodplain boundaries are included on the map prior to recording. Two, that all technical corrections, including but not limited to spelling errors, minor coordinate geometry corrections, and corrections required for compliance with the municipal code and Wisconsin state and Wisconsin statutes are made prior to recording.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call.
Ibczynski, aye.
Bekavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, I.
Hannah, I. Grillo, I.
Okay. Moving on to 8B, review site and related plans submitted by Matthew Zastro, United Parcel Service for the parking lot expansions on the property at 6800 South 6th and 8655 South Howell Avenue.
As previously noted in the prior discussion, the applicant is looking to expand their employee and truck trailer parking lots to help with any insufficient current parking that they have. Right here is the site plan. Circle or squared in the red is the truck trailer expansion, and in the yellow on the south or the bottom of the page is the employee expansion lot. Looking at the truck and trailer spots, they plan to be surrounded by chain link fencing to provide a more secured area. It does meet the minimum setback requirements to the property line to the north, so there's no issues with that code requirement. The employee expansion is projected to have 268 stalls added to it, totaling out 790 to meet their 5-year projected parking lot requirements. It does meet the setback requirements to that southern property line. Looking at their landscape plan, they do have a 160-foot easement to the south, which they have a modification request for the inability to comply with the employee expansion lots landscaping requirements, like parking islands and any landscaping within that. They want to supplement that inability by adding more perimeter landscaping around the northwest and east perimeters. I have those boxed off, and I'll be zooming them in on another slide. Right here is, you can see on the north and the west perimeters, a little extra of the trees lining the perimeter. In the red box is going to be that northeast corner closest to Howell. A little extra trees and shrubs there. In the purple box is the stormwater pond proposed, along with a little portion of the employee expansion lot. And in the yellow is the employee expansion lot with trees and grasses lining that top, and not many medians interior. Taking a look at the full landscape plan, just to kind of get an idea for everyone, they are waiting for floodplain modification approval from Wisconsin DNR. It is still in the works, so it'll change any floodplains that are currently on the property right now, and we'll have no issues for the parking lot expansions. And with that, there's a suggested motion on the screen.
All right, thank you. Once again, I'll invite the applicant up or wait on questions. If there's anything you want to state prior. Okay. Mike? No, Mike, I apologize. I should have called you up here on the first.
That's all right. I think on the previous project, things that were taken care of in the background with code compliance was completed in the proposal that was put together. So it's more on the next phase, as mentioned, the permitting and code compliance will be addressed. So again, this is Mike Havey, Oak Creek Fire, just here to discuss the expansion of the parking lot. And the reason I'm bringing this up is I think it's long overdue. And I'm anticipating that the storage of trailers on 6th Street will then be located into the designated areas for parking that they'll be moving to. I think that we've recognized this is a serious safety concern for employees, residents, and ourselves. We are neighbors to the UPS. So we're actually, we are advocating for this project so that it does give some relief to, I think some of the issues that have been brought up recently.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I was gonna make that point. It's been a long time coming, and we've tried to work with them, but this is really great to see because I couldn't have said it better myself.
That's all I got. Thanks.
Okay, let's go to council. Chauncey?
I do have a question in regards to that ATC easement, unable to add the landscaping, so planning is okay with this? I want to make sure I'm understanding that. And it was suggested the other landscaping on the other sides of the parking structure?
Staff really has no objection to the supplemental perimeter landscaping because we do see the importance of the expansions, and the original or existing parking lot kind of follows suit with the expansion. It was kind of like an older parking lot, so it doesn't really have the parking medians and such.
Okay, thank you.
And just to clarify on that's an easement for the power lines. So they don't want vegetation growing in there if they ever got to get in there.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Fred?
I have a little concern about the wetlands and the floodplain. Do you feel that there could be a potential problem down the road? How would you control that wetland and floodplain area?
Okay, so the first thing I'll address is the floodplain. The existing floodplain that's shown on the city's GIS, FEMA's mapping, is based off of modeling that was done in 2004 and previous, using ground contours or elevations topography from 1978, which is before the UPS facility was built, before 6th Street was built. So the modeling used inaccurate data. We have surveyed the site, 6th Street, and we've given that to a floodplain modeler who's taken the current approved floodplain model and has updated the topography to reflect what is actually out there. And that updated model shows that the floodplain is actually much smaller than what's shown on the current maps. It's really restricted to the area west of the existing building and does not extend along the southern portion of the property. So we are not filling the floodplain. All we're doing is remodeling to show what the floodplain actually is. So we shouldn't be impacting or causing any increases to flooding on this property or anywhere else. In terms of the wetlands, we've delineated a little over half an acre of wetland on the site. Well, we've delineated like 3 acres of wetlands on the site. We're going through the wetland permitting process with the DNR and the Army Corps of Engineers right now. The proposed project impacted just over half an acre of wetlands. Of that half acre, about 3/10 of an acre has been determined by the DNR to be man-made or artificial. Does not require permitting. It can be filled without any permitting. The remaining, I think there's 7,000 or 8,000 square feet of wetlands, falls under the DNR's non-federal exemption and the Army Corps of Engineers standard general permit coverage. So we expect to get approval from both the Army Corps of Engineers and the DNR to fill the wetlands. And the wetlands are all within the employee parking, the stretch between the employee parking and the trailer parking, and then the trailer parking. So there are additional wetlands to the south and to the east, but we are not impacting those. And again, the work that we're doing will meet stormwater code and it'll meet the wetland permitting requirements. So again, we won't be increasing stormwater runoff or causing additional issues off-site or on-site because everything's going to be managed in accordance with regulations.
So you plan on not filling any of the wetlands?
We will be filling, again, there's about 7,000 or 8,000 square feet of wetlands that we will be filling. But again, that'll be, we expect to get our permits to do that.
Thank you.
Chris? I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Ashley?
Not much. As Paul had mentioned, we did have an opportunity to review the stormwater management plan. The only thing that we are waiting for are those approvals, for the floodplain remapping and then the wetlands. So just waiting to hear from DNR and everything else looks good.
Vaughn?
No questions for me?
Christine?
I don't see the pedestrian crossing going to the building or any access to pedestrian here.
So if you look at the landscape plan that's attached, at kind of the northwest corner of the yellow box, there's a small existing building. So it's just to the northwest corner of where the employee parking lot is. That's the security office. So everybody that parks anywhere in the employee lot along the south property has to go through that security office to check in, get cleared, and then they walk wherever they need to on to the building. And there's a couple paths there to get from security up to the building itself.
What are hours of this operation?
24/7, I believe. Yeah. So
Okay.
I think there's 7 shifts. Yeah, so four shifts for employees inside the building, 5 shifts to drivers, which is why, we're pushing that need for 700 and some spaces, because there's, 1,400 employees that cycle through the facility on a daily basis.
Oh, you have enough lighting, enough security cameras out there, all
So,
of those?
Yep, for both the truck trailer parking lot and for the employee parking lot, we will be adding lighting. For the employee parking lot, because of the 160-foot easement for American Transmission Company with the overhead power lines, we couldn't do any lighting within that 160 feet. So we have lighting just to the north of it, and it didn't really give enough lighting to give us a lot of comfort for safety, security along that southern edge. We had to get basically special dispensation or, approval from ATC to have some, I think they're 6-foot tall bollard lights right behind that southern curb line for parking, just to give a little bit of light along that edge.
How about the entrance to the building? How is this going to be identified at night and people don't go in and make a U-turn? You know how people do that, and how to
The entrance to
avoid
the parking lot?
Yes, is it like locked, or people just like scan their badges, or how is this?
So the
Thanks.
parking lot does not have a security gate or anything. It's an open parking lot. The UPS facility, so north of this parking lot, there's an existing fence. We will be expanding that fence replacing a portion of the fence to the north of the employee lot. That fence goes completely around the truck trailer parking, and it'll tie into existing fence along the north. So the actual facility, the building, and where all the trucks, trailers, all that yard area is secure. There is gates along 6th Street and from the, to get through the security building for pedestrians. The employee lot is just the one part that's not locked, secured, or fenced. But, it is adjacent to the security, and I believe, Matthew, cameras and whatnot. Yeah, so there is some signage directing people to that employee lot, and there is cameras and stuff for security.
Okay, good, thank you.
Most of my stuff got covered. You guys did a nice job, so I don't have a lot of discussion or questions. Is there any other further questions? Chris?
Mayor, I just wanted to bring up again, kind of reiterating what police or fire department was talking about, was the parking on the street by the tractors. Is that something that's going to kind of be improved and taken care of now? Because they're looking, I think it seems like people are looking for relief from that.
Right, so the intention is that we're providing both the employee parking and the truck trailer parking so that things can be parked on site, not just getting, vehicles off of 6th Street, but also other remote parking. I know UPS has leased facilities that they have to, shuttle trucks or trailers to park them. It brings everything internal. I believe Ashley reached out to Milwaukee County Transit. We also reached out, or UPS reached out to Milwaukee County Transit to explore whether they could extend their bus route up 6th Street, closer to the facility. I think there's a stop right now at 6th and Rawson, but we have reached out to ask if there's the ability to add an additional stop further north, closer to the facility, so that people walking along 6th Street have a shorter distance and a little bit safer travel as well.
Thank you.
Question. Okay. Anything else? I call for a motion. Okay, motion on 8B, please.
Guzekowski makes a motion the Plan Commission approves site plans submitted by Matthew Zastro, United Parcel Service for parking lot expansions on the properties at 6800 South 6th Street and 6855 South Howell Avenue with the following conditions. One, that all relevant code requirements remain in effect. Two, that the certified survey map combining the properties is recorded prior to submission of permit applications. Three, that all light sources shall be full cutoff fixtures with the light source fully shielded and directed downward. The color temperature shall be limited to the maximum of 5,000 kelvins. And 4, that the copies of Wisconsin DNR approvals related to the proposed floodplain modifications are provided to the city prior to submission of permit applications. And 5, that all revised plans are submitted in digital format for review and approval by the Department of Community Development prior to submission of permit applications.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call, beginning with myself. Aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, I.
Hannah, I.
Grillo, aye.
Kipchinsky, aye.
Okay. Will get us to 8C, and that is site, review site, building, and related plans for St. John's Properties for a multi-tenant light manufacturing development at the property at 517 East Rawson Avenue.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Plan commissioners may recall that this was a property that went through the plan unit development review and received approval from the Common Council on December 19th of last year. This is an LM1 PUD, and it does have exceptions for the inclusion of some retail and office space in addition to LM1 uses. So the proposal includes one 38,280 square foot multi-tenant flex building, which would have the office and retail, and that's along Rawson Avenue, and three 38,176 square foot multi-tenant flex buildings that would include a combination of office, warehouse, and light manufacturing uses toward the rear. On the screen right now is the proposed site plan. Again, to the right of the screen is north, so that first building is the commercial and office building, and then the remaining 3 buildings are the flex buildings that would have a combination of the office and light industrial. This is the proposed phasing plan, so everything that is in blue is proposed for phase 1. That includes all of the infrastructure, and it includes the landscaping buffer that is on the east. In the center, in the yellow box, is phase 2, and that is for building 3. And the remainder is phase 3, and that is in green. All setbacks are met, and we did receive revised plans that you should have always had at your workstations. We've not had an opportunity to review those in their entirety, but they would incorporate revised setbacks and buffers per the plan unit development. Not necessarily that the plans that were received previous were that far off, just a couple of minor adjustments. Going back to the phasing plan, we will note that where the third phase, the third phase in the green box shows a wetland crossing, that has already been reviewed and approved by the DNR, and there is an Army Corps permit that has been provided. Access to the property is off of Rawson Avenue. There's only one single access. This is not one where we have multiple entrances and exits. And we have discussed as part of the PUD previously that there would be a requirement for future upgrade to a public road that would have to be coordinated at the time that the properties to the west would develop. So a majority of the parking for this property is actually in between buildings 1 and 2, so we'll just keep up the phasing plan for right now. Code requires that for commercial type buildings, a maximum of 50% of the required parking can be between the building and the road. So the combination of the parking toward the rear allows for a shared parking situation, in which case there might be employees or additional tenants that need some parking that can be between the two buildings. So we would like to acknowledge the change and thank the applicant for making that change. So there's 129 parking stalls that can serve both the buildings in the initial phase. That's just in between. There's an additional 70 odd parking stalls that are between the building, the first building, and Rawson Avenue. So we have nearly 200 parking stalls right out of the gate. The requirements for parking, again, we have a cumulative situation here that was identified in the PUD. General service and retail requires 1 for every 250 square feet. General office uses are 1 for every 300 square feet. And a warehouse or storage situation requires 1 for every 1,500 square feet. So when we have a combination, a development like this, we have to take a look at the cumulative possible number of parking stalls that would be required. And that gets us to a situation where we have a range. So if this was purely a retail and service and office development, we would need somewhere between 128 and 153 parking stalls for those uses. Buildings, and that's just for building 1, because building 1 is restricted to those retail, service, and office uses. Buildings 2 through 4 have a combination of office, warehouse, and storage, and that would require anywhere from 25 to 127 stalls per building. So because we don't have a pure one type of use per building, these are speculative buildings that are going to be based on tenant needs, because we're not going to have something that's purely retail, purely office, purely warehouse or storage. There's going to be a combination. Somewhere in the middle lies that sweet spot for the parking. And indeed, what has been shown on the plans for 359 total stalls basically provides for that mix, with a majority of the parking being toward those retail uses, which would have more frequent visitors and employees. And even if we were to take a look at half and half for these buildings, you would need somewhere around 70 or between 60 and 70 or 60 and 80 parking stalls for buildings 2, 3, and 4. So we do meet or come very close to what would be required for the use on the property. It's up to the Plan Commission, however, if you have an issue or a concern with the amount of parking and you feel that there should be additional parking that we can discuss tonight. There are loading docks that are provided for each of the buildings, and they are on the south for the first, second, and fourth buildings, and on the north for the third because the building is flipped. These are similar in scope and in design as the buildings that are in the development that are across the street. These are not intended to be heavy semi-truck users or tenants. Most of what we are anticipating are going to be the box truck types of deliveries. These loading docks and these parking areas are also proposed to be screened from the east by a combination of the landscape buffer that was required as part of the PUD. So there's an 80-foot setback between the buildings, the parking, and that eastern property line. Landscape buffer that we'll get into in the next slide. And also screen walls and fences, which we have received additional information about what the walls and the fences look like. So it's going to be a combination of I think it's called a Trex material, something similar to that. And then the walls will be a combination of building materials, similar to what is there for the building as proposed. Trash enclosures are also going to be on the east side, but screened by those walls and also within compliant enclosures. So those are going to be constructed with CMU to match the buildings, the Trex type materials for the gates. And then again, behind that screen wall as well. Turning now to the landscape plans, we're going to take this in a couple of steps here. What I really want to point out is the landscape buffer that is along that east portion of the property. So that's in the orange box on the screen. Orientation is such that east is on the bottom. While we don't necessarily have all of the information to determine exactly what these installations will look like, we're missing heights for some of the plants. This does point to the spirit and intent of that required landscape buffer to provide that distance and to provide some screening for the properties that are the residential properties to the east. So this is the northern part. This is covering the first two buildings and the parking areas, and then getting into the southern buildings, the last two, and also the stormwater ponds that are in the center. So we're not necessarily going into the landscaping that is also on the west side, in between the buildings and the proposed driveway. There's also a proposed fence along the west, north of the proposed driveway as well, to provide additional screening. Turning now to the buildings themselves. These buildings are going to be similar in terms of their design to the buildings that are across the street. We have a combination of CMU, LP SmartSide, and storefronts. This is particularly for Building 1, so this is the first building facing Rawson Avenue. We also have a combination of smooth face CMU accents. It's like a band around the perimeter of the building, and we do have canopies that are distinguishing each of the entries. You will note that in the staff report there was a mention about mechanical units. I believe that there is a screen wall for the mechanical units, but if there are any mechanicals besides the transformers and anything else that's not on that wall, that would also need to be screened per code. Again, these are east to west elevations, so I believe the bottom picture is actually showing the elevation that would be facing east, so facing the residential portion beyond the buffer area. Buildings 2 through 4 have the same design scheme, so they all will look just like this. A little bit different because they are more flex buildings that are intended to be for that combination of office and warehouse uses rather than the retail commercial type uses that are going to be along Rawson Avenue. Same kinds of combination of building materials, your CMU block, canopies over the entrances, storefronts, and LP SmartSide with the loading docks on the opposite side of the building. One other thing to note about the landscape plans, we did receive a tree inventory, and that tree inventory identified 12 trees to be removed, 25 to be preserved on site. There are requirements, however, for replacement of some trees that were not identified in the tree inventory to be replaced. So we do have a requirement for 37 replacements, whereas the inventory calls for 24. So that will just need to be a revision. Transition Zone D, that's that buffer area along the east side. That's actually larger than the requirement per code. This is an 80-foot buffer setback area. We do have the landscaping that is proposed to provide that additional softening, but we will need those details to determine code compliance for heights and things like that, of that nature. Mention that the mechanical units, transformers, and all utility boxes, wherever they may be on the property, will have to be properly screened. And there might be additional modifications, minor, to the landscape plans, just to confirm soil depths for the landscape islands and the installation heights for all of the proposed landscaping. Again, for buildings 2 through 4, we have the east and west elevations. The northern portion, I believe, is the west elevation. It's just reversed. We do have lighting plans, did not include them in the slides here tonight. Lighting is required to meet code requirements, and there is a maximum per the PUD that all fixtures be limited to 3,500 kelvins and shielded on the sides that are facing the residential areas. So that's actually on the east and the west. So the entire property is limited to that 3,500 Kelvin, wherever it may be. Signs had been included in previous submissions. They are not part of tonight's review. All signs on the property, building, ground, monument, those will all have to be part of a master landscape plan that are submitted for Plan Commission review and approval at a later date. And utility comments that have been identified in the staff report are currently under revision. So with all that information in mind, there is a suggested motion in two parts on the screen for Commissioner consideration. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Before we start, applicant, would you like to come up, answer, make a statement or anything like that, or just wait on questions?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. My name is Jason Akilski. I'm with St. John Properties, 2000 Pewaukee Road, Suite A, Waukesha, Wisconsin. Before you, I have additional plan sets that were revised to address some of the comments that were on staff's conditions. If you look at the first page, I have the Milwaukee County approval letter, the DOT, for the road work in Rawson Avenue. If you turn to the next page, there is the approval from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for the wetland crossing. 2 pages beyond that is the DNR approval for the wetland crossing. The next page is an approval from the Federal Aviation Administration for the building heights, because we're close to the airport. So we have approval from the FAA to construct the buildings. If you go then to the page where there's a fence, that's the proposed type of fence we're looking for. Solid panel to, the fencing goes from between buildings. There's a screen wall that's gonna be made of CMU, and then the rest will be of this fence. The idea is to keep parking or traffic lights from the parking lot from shining over into the residential area. There is a proposed fence, like Carrie said, on the north side, northwest side, to help screen the couple residential houses on that end of the property. So then page L1.6 shows a detail at the bottom there of how the fence, PVC fence, will be installed. And then the next page, A-104, shows the screen wall and the dumpster enclosure details of how they're constructed. The next page, page L1.0, is our updated landscape plan. It shows the proper tree preservation with the increased trees that Carrie was talking about. It also includes landscaping, the additional islands we had to add in the parking areas. We need an island, one island for every 9 to 10 stalls. And then the next couple of pages are just additional landscape plans. But if you look at page L1.2, on the left-hand side of the buildings, there's a box with a T. That's where the proposed transformers are, and then you can see we have the landscaping screening around those to meet the code. On the right side of that transformer box is where a screen wall comes off the building, a 6-foot CMU screen wall. The electrical gear will be mounted on the inside of that wall to, that'll help it keep screened from the road. Going over to page, you go to the site plan C1.0. It also shows kind of where the transformers are placed on the sides of the buildings. And it is updated to show that we have met all the setback requirements. So these plans are to meet the setbacks. The next page, A-203, kind of shows the building elevations, and then there's notes on where the mechanicals will be mounted on the building and the screen wall. So in the middle of the buildings is kind of where the gas meter bank will be, and then again, on the side off that screen wall is where we have the transformer and the electrical service equipment mounted. Page A203 shows it for building number 2. This is the next page, excuse me, is our lighting plan. It's updated to show that we will only have the light output at 3,000 kelvins. We removed the lights from the sides of the buildings to keep the wash from going into the residential property. And again, we'll work with staff if there's any additional shielding that needs to be done with that. The next plan, or the next page, C4.0, is our updated utility plan. We added a hydrant at the end of the line that heads east towards Missouri Ave, and we switched that out and put a T in instead of the 3 45-degree elbows. We also updated the public water main to a 12-inch as requested by staff. And then, again, as Carrie said, we'll come in with a separate submittal for all the signage for the property. So we'll bring that packet in as a separate submittal.
Okay, great. Hang on, sir. Is that it for now?
Yeah, that. I just hope that addressed some of the comments, the additional comments that were on.
Okay. Got a couple residents, we'll take their questions, and then we'll try to answer them in order, and we'll go to council, we'll try to take care of it orderly. Some of the questions may be redundant.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks.
Stand by. Public, got a comment? Name and address.
Mike Piechowski, 251 East Rawson Avenue. And some of my concerns are, again, I live right across from the St. John's property that's being constructed now at 140 East Rawson. And one of my questions are, is there a time zone when they can do construction?
Oh, you mean,
Starting and stop
starting
time when
times?
the contractors can be in there?
I believe the standard time is, off the top of my head, it's either 6 a.m. or 7, and usually it's like 8 o'clock in the summer. They can work around whatever they need, depending on what they do. But in the summertime, they try to take advantage of all the light.
I get that, but I mean, if they say in the summertime, which is what happens, if it's light by 5:30 in the morning.
No, there's set times,
Well,
and it's,
okay,
is it
but
7?
Yep. No work can take place prior to 7 a.m.
what about holidays?
We do, I believe, have restrictions for holidays. I'd have to look into that. Sundays, I believe, too. I know for a roadway construction project, so I'd have to look into development as well.
Well, let me, so this is gonna be a concern for these new properties coming up, because let me explain what has been going on, and they've been, basically, I think this has been about a 10-year project across the street. It took them that long. They built the first 2 buildings, and then now they're building the last building. So it isn't like they come in one summer and they get this thing done, and they make the noise and the dust, it's all over with. But the issue is that what has been going on, and I'll give you a good example. Thanksgiving Day, they had roofing contractors by me, and they were installing the steel roofing. And how they do that is these are steel corrugated panels, and they put this roof on, and they have I'm assuming an air-operated gun. It's a nailer. And they were putting this roof on all Thanksgiving Day, and it's like shooting into this tin Thanksgiving Day. So these are some of the, so these are the things that have happened there. Also, in the summertime when they can, if they can get out there at 5:30 in the morning, they're out there with the heavy equipment, and this heavy equipment is bulldozers and dump trucks, which is like in Gold Rush. It isn't like even the biggest dump trucks that we have on the road now, the 20-tonners. These are huge trucks. They're out there, they have been out there first thing in the morning, and they start these projects. And the other thing they do is that once they're done, they were done using these vehicles, they will have semis come in at midnight to pick this equipment up. So you're sleeping in bed and all of a sudden you hear this truck and coming in and they're loading this heavy equipment up, and these are the issues that have happened. So they have not adhered to any kind of.
Okay, so here's the deal. We've had contractors come in here, like when they were doing I-94, they had to haul stuff, whatever, it was 6 o'clock. If it's 7 o'clock start time, as Ashley said, which I believe she's correct, that's a compliance officer. All you have to do is call us.
Okay.
Our engineering staff will go out.
Right.
Why anybody come at midnight, and I'm not saying it didn't happen or whatever the deal was, that's ridiculous. It's dangerous, and it just, I've worked in construction my whole life. I've never seen anybody pick up equipment and did it.
Well, they have, you know, and
So whatever. But anyways, that can all be worked out through our conditions.
but the one point I want to make is that, as always, they have not had any consideration for the homeowners when it has been come to construction again, and this is going to be worse because these are in these people's backyards. And so, as far as, which I don't understand if St. John's knows this, why do we have to constantly say, hey, you know, could you guys have some common sense here, and you make sure your contractors work within the time frame that they're supposed to, and then I have to be made out to be the bad guy and complain.
Well, I understand, but to say constantly, you're the only one I've ever heard this from. So,
Well, that's because it's right across the street.
but again, it's after the fact.
Yeah,
We
I get
can't,
it, but
we
I'm
can't
just-
do anything,
I'm
you know,
just-
that's
that's
water
what I
under the
said.
bridge.
Yep.
So if it's happening, let us know. We'll get with St. John's property and we'll correct it.
But these are the things I mentioned for this project coming up, because this project's even gonna be bigger than what they're doing across the street now, and they're building basically the same thing, and could be the same issues, so that's all.
Thanks for the input. Anyone else? Folks have been here for a while. Do you have any questions concerning the project? Okay. Let's go to the commission. Christine?
Yes, I actually have a question for the applicant. So my very first question is it's the very first sentence, the one of the Department of the Army Corps of Engineers here. A request for authorization to permanently discharge fill material into wetland of the construction of 4 commercial use buildings.
That, when we cross over the wetlands, we have to put culverts in so that all the runoff, you know, can continue through the wetland under where we pass over with our roadway into the wetland on our property. So that's part of the approval. I can't stop wetland from going into another wetland, if that makes sense.
No, say it again.
So the wetlands on my property extends into the property to the west of us.
Okay.
So where I cross over that,
Mhm.
I have to put, you know, culverts under the road
Sure.
so that it can continue to pass through. So
Okay.
that's the approval.
For you to
putting
put the culverts?
Yeah.
So what it says is discharge fill material into wetland. This is not
Because they'll have to
discharge.
put,
I'll
they'll have to line it in stone.
I'll have to fill in a little bit of that wetland area to get my road through.
Yeah, the wording is a little different than that, so I misunderstood. So do you have to do some kind of material testing to make sure that there's no hazardous materials or anything from that sort?
You mean for me putting hazardous materials in?
No, like when you remove dirt or when you do some digging or anything from that sort, if you do cores or,
Yeah, we did land testing and.
okay, so
and
everything,
Yeah.
there is no
Yep.
hazmat issues or anything from that sort?
Correct.
Okay, that's it, thank you.
Dawn?
I have no questions.
Ashley?
There will be a development agreement that will be required for this project for the public water main. Within that development agreement, we'll likely be including cross-section requirements for that driveway, just as Carrie talked about. For the potential of a public road ever expanding in the future, just then that section of road would be up to public standards when you would construct your driveway. The other question I did have is, so you have a sheet that shows turning movements, and those turning movements include trucks turning into the facility. I guess just have you looked at the turning movements within the property, any concerns from fire, and then I guess in between those different phases. So I know turning movements were looked at on that phase 3, but then now seeing that there's a phase 1 and a phase 2, just making sure that everybody's comfortable with turning movements within those phases.
Yes, we're comfortable with it. My engineers have looked at it, but I don't know if the fire chief has something to.
Go ahead, Jason.
As the property owner, we're content with the amount of space for the turning radiuses, and if you need more information from the engineers, I can have my civil.
Okay, that'd be great. Yeah, I believe more or less between like buildings 2 and 3. So I know we did look at that building 4 and movements there, and seeing those retaining walls between building 2 and building 3. It'd be good to take a look at those turning movements.
Okay.
Chief Havey?
Good evening again, Mike Havey Fire. So our initial review, it meets code compliance, but just barely. Because of the length of the roadway, it is code compliant, but we still need to make sure there's no finite changes so that we do have movement with our fire department access roads. And I think that's when the site planning, as long as these are accurate, if there are changes, we do have to keep an eye on that distance because it's 450 feet and it's pretty close to that.
Is there anything else from fire? Because I was going to call you.
That was the significant issue that we looked at. Like I said, it's just keeping an eye on if there's any changes that may change the threshold of we would require turning movements if they go over that 450-foot distance from that primary or secondary road access point.
Hydrants, everything like that.
So water utility, or for the private water supply, our plan rules will be done by a third-party consultant, and they have to conform based on code requirements and the flow testing in the area.
I'm good, thank you.
Chris?
I don't have any questions.
Fred?
Yeah, do you have any idea about the truck traffic once this development is going? How many trucks on a daily basis would be utilizing this facility?
It's hard to say because it's all kind of speculative on what kind of tenants we get, but from experience with the development across the street, we have one tenant that gets some tractor trailer deliveries, but most of the other tenants get box truck, FedEx type, Amazon vans. So that's kind of how we set up, anticipating keeping the heavy trucking out of this site, as talked about in zoning. So I don't know how many trucks are going to be in there. It depends on what kind of tenants move into the property.
Okay. Thank you.
I do have a couple questions. Thanks for the update, because I had a few more questions, but that took care of a lot of them.
Okay.
One question that I had, there was a comment about the buildings are designed with steps. What does that mean? Is it at different levels, or is one building higher or lower than the other? I'm just trying to understand what that means.
There's you mean the phases? Like we're.
It's saying, who did this? St. John Properties, I think, is the person or organization that provided this. It says the buildings are designed with steps to give architectural breakup.
Oh, that's on the elevations. They have bump outs, what the architects call steps, to give it depth on the building. So that's
That's the relief of the building. So the roof line and the
Oh, the
relief
roof.
of the building.
So the brown part is the lowest part?
Yes.
Okay, that'll be the lowest part. Okay. And that's the color that you have in the front right there?
Yeah, those are
Okay.
kind of the proposed colors of that front building. Just to give idea of the materials.
And then another question that I had was in regards to the 3 buildings. Will there be movement from one building to the other?
As far as like a tenant going back and forth?
Yes, or
Um,
customers going back and forth, or employees going back and forth? Are they connected in some way?
No, and typically a tenant will take all the space they need up front in one building, and then we kind of leave a bay open in between tenants for the possibility of expansion. If the business grows and needs more space, we like to leave an opportunity for them to have additional space without having to, take another section in another building, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm, that does. Thank you.
Okay. Well, you answered a ton of questions going forward. It is a unique development, and it makes this one much easier because we did see what happened to the north of it. So, as he mentioned with St. John's property, it's hard to say what kind of tenants will come in here, but based on what came in to the other properties, and I've toured a few of them, they generally don't require semis coming in, as he said, like LabCorp is in one of them, and they took like 3 tenant spots.
They took almost 2/3 the building.
It's,
Yeah,
it's
like
big.
6.
And you'd go in there, you'd be amazed in how they built it out, and what they're doing there, and they're running 2 shifts. It's primarily employees, and nothing more is coming than a van with stuff they sample. So I see similar uses going on here, rehabilitation, stuff like that for both humans and animal, stuff like that. So I was concerned a little bit with fire. Ashley kind of really addressed that one. I think a lot of thought has gone into the neighborhood to the east, which is greatly appreciated. I know the alderman has made that mention every time this has come up throughout his district, come in front of us. It's really the lighting plan is the one thing I can see. I'd like to see that you lowered the Kelvins, and again, I don't know how that plays out, if they can be on a controller and work with local police to even dim them in the evening. You want to prevent any crime or vandalism, but be respectful of the neighbors as well, and save some energy, because they're going to be LED.
There is a requirement per code that in off hours, the lighting for the site would have to be extinguished by 50%.
Oh, okay. So Carrie's already got that one covered. So, because they do tend to, when there's nothing there, it just seems like a lot's there when something appears. Ashley kind of has the development agreement. Everything will be addressed there. Also, there's going to be a 200-foot turn lane coming into this as per Milwaukee County. Seen the letter. So, I think we're okay, and just to be clear, this is never going to attach to the neighborhood to the east. I know it's not going through, but yet you've probably maybe, I'm going to say this with confidence, probably improved the drainage area with the retention.
Yeah, I would think that instead of having it sheet flows into that wetland area right now, the whole site, so having parking lot and the proper storm going into the ponds is gonna.
So we may see some improvement there.
I'm
And
hoping
then
so.
plus, you bumped up that line. I'm sure the water loops through there, so the 12-inch line's gonna be better as well. So, that's all I got. I can't even make anything up anymore. You had this pretty well down. You did have some materials to show us. Did you bring in?
Yeah.
By chance? Oh.
Yeah.
Maybe the commissioners would like to just kind of see it.
Just pick it up.
It would give them an idea of material is gonna be used, so.
Yeah. Looks good.
Rock.
Mhm. So, Carrie, I have a question for you. I don't know if it's per code or not, especially for the wall that we saw for, that we don't know the height yet of it. And this is that is going to have the trees part of that, the code or like the front of the building. Um, we don't know about the maintenance of the trees and how they're gonna look, and the enforcement of it will be sometimes hard to do so. Is that wall can be anywhere to be bricks, decorative bricks, or with like decorative lighting? Is this something that can be done from that sort? Will be permanently decorative instead
So-
of putting lighting?
You're talking about the screen wall that's on the east to screen the loading docks and the parking areas, correct?
Yeah, if you can bring back the screen where you have those lighting, I'm sorry, the walls that there is no height
We
shown
don't,
yet.
it's not really,
Yes,
you can't really see it on the elevations themselves, but the wall is gonna be 6 feet tall, if I remember correctly. The walls themselves will be constructed with CMU. And then the fence material is this vinyl Trex type material. So that's the combination of two for the screening that's being proposed. So it's CMU and vinyl fence.
okay.
And then the landscaping will be closer to the property line, so farther away from that. Maintenance requirements are such that you have an approved landscape plan. That landscape plan must be maintained.
I know.
So that's gonna be the requirement moving forward. It's part of the PUD and it's part of this approval, so any kind of landscaping that gets approved in this forum is required to be maintained, and if there's any die-off or replacements, it would have to be in kind with the plan.
Is it permitted per years or like how many years, or is it just permanent?
It's a requirement per the PUD, that
Okay.
landscaping has to be there.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Keep in mind, we usually have almost probably much better luck with businesses maintaining their landscape than homeowners in many cases, and keeping it up. Because it is their business. If there's no other discussion or questions, look for a motion.
Guzekowski makes a motion that the Plan Commission approves the site and building plans submitted by 517 East Rawson Avenue LLC for 4 multi-tenant speculative flex buildings on the property at 517 East Rawson Avenue with the following conditions. 1, that all relevant code requirements remain in effect. 2, that all approvals and permits from the Milwaukee County Department of Transportation are provided to the city prior to the submission of permit applications. 3, that all plans are updated to include details for all fences and screen walls. 4, that the tree inventory and replacement plan is updated to include the required 37 replacement trees, and that landscape plans are revised to meet code requirements. 5, that the plans are revised to include locations for all mechanicals, transformers, and utilities. All mechanical equipment, transformers, and utility boxes, ground, building, and rooftop shall be screened from view. 6, that all light sources shall be full cutoff fixtures with the light source fully shielded and directed downward. The color temperature of the fixture shall be limited to a maximum of 3,500 kelvins. Shields shall be on the side facing residential properties. 7, that the master sign plan is submitted for sign review and approval by the plan commission prior to the submission of permit applications for any sign in the development. 8, that all water and sanitary sewer requirements are coordinated with the water and sewer utility. And 9, that the revised plans, site, building, landscaping, etc., are submitted in digital format for review by the Department of Community Development prior to the submission of building permit applications.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call, beginning with you, Chris.
Guzekowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Hannah, I.
Grillo, aye.
Kipchinsky, aye.
Gavich, aye. Okay. That is about it. Today is Fat Tuesday for those that partake. So if you haven't got your punchkis in yet, you got a few hours to get to them, and then you're out of luck for a while. So enjoy. Other than that, move for adjournment.
Grillo moves to adjourn at 7:34.
Chandler, second.
Roll call, beginning with Fred.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Hannah, I.
Grillo, aye.
Kipchinsky, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
All right. Good night, everybody.